Avoid using language that is unparliamentary and out of order. Honorable members, keep quiet.
Stop thinking through your stomachs.
Honorable members,
use your brains to think.
South Africa, like many other democracies around the world, has always had a parliament. During apartheid, that parliament only represented the minority, in other words, white South Africans. Since 1994, our parliament and legislatures is meant to be made up of people from the different political parties that we, the public, vote for in elections. Together, these politicians are supposed to make sure that the laws of the country and the services that departments deliver serve the interest of the majority, and also that they do not unfairly discriminate against any groups. Legislatures is another word for parliament. We have national parliament in Cape Town, and we also have 9 provincial legislatures, 1 in each province. In South Africa, we typically refer to national parliament as parliament and to the provincial parliament as legislatures. The Constitution of South Africa says what legislatures must do. It says that the most important roles the legislatures must play in our democracy is to represent the people and to ensure government by the people under the Constitution. So, our legislatures are meant to belong to the people and not to the political parties. The politicians in legislatures are put there by the political parties that we vote for. They are called members of parliament or members of the provincial legislatures. They are meant to act on our behalf, in other words, in our best interest, and they are meant to listen to what we have to say. There are 3 main things Parliament is meant to work on. Make or amend or fix laws so that the law is fair and good for our society. Make sure that government departments do their job to deliver services to the people of South Africa properly and for the good of the majority. In this way, legislatures must be like the boss of government. They have a responsibility to facilitate public participation in all their work. This must be more than just telling us what they are doing. They must also ask us what we think and take our views seriously when they make decisions.
My name is Khadija Bawa. I'm a researcher at the Social Justice Coalition. I'm currently doing my master's at Stellenbosch University. My master's looks at gender-based violence in relation to the police service in South Africa. And it's quite traumatizing, but I'm very excited about my project.
Khadija, tell me, what makes you, in your mind, an activist?
So at university, I kind of had a bit of an awakening. So I was born in a very small Afrikaans town, about 2 hours outside of Cape Town, called Porterville. And so spatial apartheid existed there, but I was too young to really know what that meant. And then we moved back to my mother's family home in Belgravia, in Cape Town. And it was there that I went to an all-Muslim primary school. And then when I was in high school, I went to a girls' school. And when I was in high school, I think I really encountered whiteness and white supremacy and what that meant in relation to everyone else. I think I'm an activist because I understood that something was wrong in high school, but it was only when I got to Stellenbosch University and I became friends with other activists that I got the language to understand why our current state is messed up. And interacting with those people really gave me the language to very clearly point out certain problems and very clearly understand and unpack certain problems. So I'm an activist because apartheid sort of did this to us. You kind of have to be an activist in South Africa, especially if you're a woman, especially if you're a woman of color. And obviously in my religion, patriarchy also plays a massive role and rears its ugly head. So, you're fighting on all fronts every single day for your opinion, for your right to things. So we are, and I am an activist because we have to be, but we are, and I am also an activist because not all of us are free yet, and it's important that we look for and define and demand the rights that we want.
I want to talk to you about leadership.
Yeah.
So Parliament essentially, in essence, is about leadership. When you say the management design of our country.
Yeah.
If you had to look at the design of Parliament objectively as a young fired up activist on the on the beginning of your career, if you had to look at it objectively, what are the architects, metaphorically, would you say we need in South Africa to look at the design of Parliament? And is it something that can be fixed? Is the design fixable? Is it something that we need to kind of start the blueprint all over again? But looking from it, from your experience as a woman, as an activist, as a Muslim, as a daughter, as so many things, not SJC now, just as Khadija, what would you say is the issue with the design?
Just on the architect of it, like the space is so old and white, and so even the building itself, obviously we've built onto it, but it still retains some architecture of the old, National Party headquarters, if you will. As a young person and as a woman, and like as a Steve Biko identifying black woman, there aren't many of our faces in Parliament, right? So we have now Naledi Chirwa, and she's amazing. But the ruling party, you don't see much of our faces in positions that really matter, in positions of power, in positions that can really make a difference. And I think that's one of the things when I walk into Parliament, I'm always noticing that there are so many old people. Old people that are tired. You can see it in their faces. They're all exhausted. They don't want to be doing this work, and they don't have the understanding of what young women, especially and poor black young women, are going through in this country right now.
Would you say that your leadership capabilities, for example, when you walk into that space and you can say, I'm meant to be here, my voice can carry in this room, where do you think that comes from?
So I don't actually feel that way when I walk into Parliament. So I don't think the atmosphere in Parliament is very welcoming or even accommodating. I think it's very like they are top dogs, and those are obviously the ministers, and then everyone that works for them, and then everyone who works in Parliament, and literally at the bottom of the barrel are like anyone from civil society, and then even below that is concerned citizens. So there's definitely a hierarchy for me about who feels welcome and who feels like they have legitimacy. Legitimacy is something that I'm trying to grapple with very recently, trying to talk about our spaces as women, right? Are we legitimate? Like, do we have the rights of citizens everywhere we go? Right? And the answer is obviously no, because we're terrified all the time. But in Parliament specifically, I don't think that there is the culture and atmosphere of constant affirming legitimacy that everyday people and even people in civil society have. It feels as if you are there by the grace of the overlord that is the MPs of Parliament. So it's a bit whack. But apart from Parliament, in civil society spaces, the legitimacy I feel is because of the journey that I went through at Stellenbosch. It's an extremely oppressive space. And when I started there, I was extremely quiet. I didn't have the language to understand why this place was really messed up. But now I do, and I can call bullshit out. And I essentially, I don't know, man, we're always scared, and there's always something to be fearful of, whether it's a SAPS officer during a protest or whether it is a man walking down the street. But in our civil society spaces, I know that knowledge is power. And I know that I know some stuff. I make some points and I know some stuff. And that really is power, right? So, as an everyday citizen, if you live in a rural community and your interactions with SAPS or a prosecutor is bad, and you have the knowledge to know how it should be operating, that's extreme power on your side. That's power of conviction to a certain extent, but it's also just the power of that you deserve better. And I think for the younger people of our generation, that's something that we have grappled with and are grappling, and so that's why people call us entitled, because it was so bad in the past. And yes, it was, but we were also promised certain things, and we are promised every single day. Our constitution is a promise, right? These are the things that you're entitled to, and we see very little of that. And it's important that we know that these are the things that we are supposed to be given, are supposed to have access to, are supposed to be entitled to, and it's just not the case.
On that note of entitlement, I want to talk about the millennial age. A lot of people that are older will say things like, you guys are entitled, but with that it comes a lot of fire. How would you want to encourage other young people listening to this to step into changing the leadership structure of the country? What would you say?
Firstly, I think historically young people have always been badasses, right? So even during apartheid, during colonialism, young people have a passion and a fire with seemingly, the old people will say, very little to lose, right? We don't have children, we don't have mortgages, we don't have, or not yet, but capitalism will get us. But we we don't have those responsibilities yet. And so for us to see something wrong and call it out and say that this is bullshit and be able to say that no, we demand better. We have access to, and it's literally from the time that you're 16, 17 to the time you're 25. But also young people in this country are doing phenomenal things. They're doing, like, if you look at the work of equal education, my God, there are 14-year-olds that are leading protests. There are 14-year-olds and 10-year-olds that are saying, we don't want pit toilets in schools anymore. We don't want mud schools anymore. We don't want asbestos in our walls when we're sitting in a classroom and supposed to be learning. Children, you can literally say children instead of just young people. Children in this country are so aware and are so active in, just like you said, the reimagining process. And it's really sad that they aren't given the seriousness and the platform, and they aren't taken as seriously as they should be by members of parliament. And I mean, like, if you think about, this is obviously super maternal and like gendered, but like if you think of children as needing protection, as being extremely vulnerable, but also as the future of every and anything in our country and everywhere in the world. I mean, that's just the way the world works. But you'd want to go logically, you'd want to go above and beyond to make sure that the next generation of South Africa is taken care of, right? That they're not dying going to the bathroom in their school. And the fact that politicians and parliamentarians dismiss young people, children, is rude, disappointing, and often just so callous. It's really sad. Like, it's heartbreaking.
I want to talk to you about that exactly. The activist heart, is not something that you find in other sectors. There's something that's very unique about the people, and that's the heart. But it's that thing of making changes because you're thinking of the collective all the time.
Yeah.
How do we get the people? You said they're tired.
Yeah.
You said the people in Parliament are tired. I mean, you've been there.
Yeah.
Right? How do we get the people to activate the activism heart? Where do you start with that?
I mean, okay, so multifold answer, but one of it is just that these people need to retire, right? Like, they're old and they need to retire, and that's okay, right? The country is not going to die without you, right? It's actually the opposite. Young people will come in with a rejuvenation and a life and a passion for making things better. And that's part of the process, is that you step aside. And I mean, like, if you look at the ruling party and like the ANC and it's not just old people, but it's old people that have been through CODESA, right? I mean, from democracy to CODESA to the apartheid government to resistance fighters. Like, they've lived long lives, and I would be tired too, right? I'd be exhausted. I'd be like, where's my beach, right? And that's okay. Like, one of the biggest problems that we have, you can call it the activist art, but it's really the political will to see things through, to call things out and see things through and reimagine something better. And if you're tired, you don't have literally the energy to have that political will. And that's one of the biggest problems we have in our sector. And in South Africa, people don't have the political will to do much. And so you kindly take your retirement package and you move on to your beach, and you let younger people that are passionate about issues and themselves and the community that they come from and other communities, you let them step in. And when they've also burnt out, you also let them step aside. Like, this is a natural progression. It's odd and heartbreaking for us because this is the first time, 25 years. It's the first time that we can see this whole process unfold. Before that, it was nepotism and a white welfare state and racism and apartheid and legislation. But now, you can see and you can talk about how it unfolds, and you can want for better. And children are wanting for better, and young adults are wanting for better. And some older people are also wanting for better.
How did you find yourself working at the Social Justice Coalition, or SJC for short, and the match to your own kind of political thinking?
I worked at an organization that did a lot of top-down sort of activism. So it was a very intellectual, and I mean, there's a place for that, and it's really important, and obviously we have to create space for that. But it wasn't really the sort of activism that I wanted to do. And then SJC was sort of the other extreme. SJC does that groundwork activism, and it does it in a way where it's gentle and it's kind and it's supportive. It's not paternalistic. I mean, in a lot of NGO spaces in South Africa, you have a lot of paternalism, a lot of this is the right way and you should do it that way. And SJC, in every room in SJC, things are different, right? So if you step into policy and research, we will talk to you about gender-based violence, they'll talk to you about policy, they'll talk to you about the right to protest. And if you step into the organizer's office, it's very different, right? They'll talk to you about organizing, mobilizing. They'll talk to you about the UISP, upgrading of informal settlements. They'll talk to you about basic services. The SJC really has very different things going on. But to be a part of that space and to, you know, for a young person, I'm always looking to learn stuff, right? So I know that I don't know much, but I'm very excited to learn. You have older activists at SJC who are 40 years old that were at SJC 10 years ago when it started, but were also in Mkonto Isizwe, right? And then you have younger people like me who are like, you know, fresh out of the womb of activism at least, and just super eager to learn. So SJC really gives you an opportunity to submerge yourself however you want to. Like, you can latch onto something a colleague is doing and you can completely just surround yourself in that. So it's a very interesting and it's a very informative space, and I'm really happy to be there.
So I want to bring the conversation back to Parliament. Was it at SJC that you first started working with Parliament or going to Parliament? Can you tell us a little bit, firstly, for me, about your own experiences, first experiences of going to Parliament, and then SJC's work specifically with Parliament?
I remember when I was at university, one of the organizations I was a part of, we went to Parliament. And what was interesting about going when I was at university is that I went to a national parliament sitting where I was sitting on top somewhere, and someone was saying, oh, it is about Fees Must Fall. So someone was saying some bullshit. And then obviously the students were getting hyped up, and John Steenhuisen looks at us and he starts swearing at us. Like, who the fuck do you think you are? Why are you here? Who asked you for your opinion? And I was like, why is this man so rude? Why are you being so mean? Like, we're just here, you know, trying to figure stuff out with you. Then I got to SJC and obviously went a bit more frequently. For my very first time, I went to a portfolio committee. I'd obviously never entered that space, didn't even know that space existed. Studied BA law, but obviously, you know, when you go to a university like Stellenbosch, they tell you that the law and politics were separate, even though the party government clearly didn't think so. But anyway, I digress. So didn't really know how the entire parliamentary process worked. So at SJC, I was, you know, thrown in, and that was really, really exciting. From witnessing one space where it was super hostile and very shouty, to a different space, the portfolio committee, where, you know, decisions are made and issues are unpacked.
I remember from us talking about some of the work that SJC has done in the portfolio committees. I know that you guys have had opportunities to make actual inputs to the politicians, where you're sharing information with them and you're trying to influence them with what you know and from your activism in communities. SJC specifically, and you in your role, they had very different experiences in those committees with politicians, where you're trying to influence them and tell them stuff.
So SJC has made a number of presentations to the South African Police Service or Portfolio Committee on Policing. Obviously, the Portfolio Committee does other stuff other than just SAPs, but we had specifically been called to make certain presentations around policing. The SJC was one of the organizations that led or instigated the starting of the Khadija Commission of Inquiry. The Khadija Commission of Inquiry was an inquiry into policing services in Khadija, and had the recommendations have massive impact for understanding how police services are discriminatory, but also how policing in informal communities is a complete disarray. or my manager had been called a few times to make presentations. The last presentation we did was on the crime stats, right? So we did a presentation on how the crime stats makes it obvious that how police resources are allocated in informal settlements is discriminatory, right? So this was based on the Khadija Commission of Inquiry. This was based on our court case where we took the Minister of Police to court. But it also focused on other things, right? So the presentation was really well done. We focused on all levels of government, and we said, today we're looking at the crime stats, right? We're looking at the murder rates especially, and each level of government has a role to play in mitigating how often violent crimes and especially murder happens. How our presentation landed was very different, right? So during the question and answer sessions, those in the portfolio committees nitpicked on politics. During our presentation, we said national government should do this, provincial government should do this, the city of Cape Town should do this. And during the question and answer session, it was either, oh, but like, why are you attacking the ANC? Or it would be, oh, why are you attacking the DA? There was a disconnect between what we were trying to say is the problems and should be, highlighted, listened to, and acted on, versus what those in the portfolio committee heard. A very big portfolio committee. They do lots of things. They're one of the biggest portfolio committees, but also filled with very party political, very loyal people to their parties and very old people, right? So you could literally hear when their political party was mentioned, or see when their political party was mentioned, they'd sit up straighter and then they'd pay attention and then they'd not pay attention again. So in that space, it was, I was so disappointed. That was the first time I'd been a part of an organization that could directly present to a portfolio committee. And in civil society, that hardly ever happens. You are hardly ever called to come and make a presentation on something. And that's obviously really sad and shouldn't be the case. We would talk about what the city of Cape Town can do, right? So we'd say, like where there is no street lighting, violent crimes escalate, right? So when people can't see who's attacking them, they're not reporting, right? When criminals or people that have violent tendencies see that there are no street lighting, they target women, especially women who get up early to go to work, women who come late home from work. And so we mentioned that this is something that the city of Cape Town can do. And then people are just like, but what are you saying about the city of Cape Town? And this is an attack on the city of Cape Town. And why are you attacking the DA? And I'm just like, that's not the point. The point is that you should do the things. So I was really disappointed. And so after that, I try and engage who are some of the people that, are invested in what is being said, what the problems are, and making an effort. And who are some of the people that just need to retire. Yeah.
Why does SJC keep working and going back to Parliament, or see Parliament as a point of importance for them in their activism?
Maybe it is a fruitless exercise, but you had a whole commission of inquiry. I mean, the commission of inquiry was established in 2012. The recommendations are 20 recommendations, all the way from FCS units that deal with gender-based violence and domestic violence, right? To how police are allocated, to how the police work with community, to visible policing in informal settlements. Like, if we think about all the problems that we have in policing in South Africa, there's a recommendation for it. Like, I think that's the most heartbreaking. So you have a recommendation, and the people that have the political will don't pick it up. And then you take the minister, you choose one recommendation, which is the allocation of police resources. You take the minister to court. The minister participates in the court process, defending a discriminatory allocation. Then you go to Parliament and you are trying to not only stir political will, but stir the caring of other people. And especially people who sit in that committee, who can hold the minister accountable. How politics works in South Africa is that the everyday person, and especially the vulnerable and marginalized and historically dispossessed person, holds very little power. And so we go to these presentations to call on the people that do have power, to say, look, this August was 5 years since the release of the recommendations, right? 5 years, and almost nothing has changed. take up the recommendations, hold the minister accountable. We go there in the hopes that those that have the political will have the language and the knowledge and the expertise to call out certain things and to, spearhead and enact other things. We go to these spaces to make sure that everyone understands that problems have been identified and solutions have been identified, and the only thing that we're missing is the political will of the people that have the power to do so.
But there's a sense of that we have a right to hold these parliaments and the politicians accountable and to get them to do what they are supposed to do.
Yeah.
So I think that's a little bit of what you've been speaking about. But another layer for me is with SJC's work in particular. You mentioned some stuff like you've gone to court, you've participated in the Khadija Commission of Inquiry, and you go to Parliament. So it sounds like SJC also has this kind of stage. You try different things to get politicians to actually listen to you. Maybe you can just quickly tell us about that approach, because you're not only going to Parliament.
One of the difficulties in civil society right now is to literally come up with a exact right calculation, to get the issue to be heard. So you can protest, and the SJC has done that multiple times. We had to protest Helen Ziller at the time to just instigate the Commission of Inquiry. We said, this is in your competencies, it's in the Constitution. And she was like, no, it's not, and we had to take it to the Constitutional Court for that, right? And now, now she says that the DA led the Khadija Commission of Inquiry. But it's difficult to think about what campaigns or advocacy tools you can tap into. And so every day you'll sit in meetings and you'll be like, what creative thing can we do to hold these people accountable? One of the biggest holes that all of us are hitting is just the lack of political will. You can appeal to the minister. You can only write so many letters. You can only send so many emails. You can only take someone to court so often until everyone realizes that this person is obviously not capable of doing the things that they ought to be doing. Litigation in the civil society sector has become the default, right? So you'll mobilize on the ground, right? And it'll be amazing, right? So you'll have communities who come out with their numbers and say, this is our problem. And you'll have researchers who'll be like, this is what the problem looks like in legislation, right? In law, right? And then you'll have other people that say, this is how we can fix the problem, right? So you all come together and you do this beautiful thing where you've mapped out the problem, you have the language, you have the lived experiences, you have everything, right? And then you send a letter or you protest in front of Parliament and you give it to your minister. And the minister either ignores it or makes a promise that he's going to do it in a year's time, and then he never does it, right? And then you have to go back and protest. And at some point, litigation comes in. So litigation is to take someone to court.
Because now you've got full, because you did the whole exercise.
Exactly.
And nothing's worked and this guy's not listening.
Yeah.
So litigation, you actually going to force the situation.
Yes, right. But there's multiple problems with that. Number one, these are people's lives, right? You're not asking for fucking lucky packet. You're asking for basic services, right? You're asking for toilets. You're asking for water. You're asking for a police to be accountable in one of the highest murder rates in a particular area in the country, right? So it doesn't make sense that the community of Nyanga has to go to PPiPP and be like, can we please fix policing in Nyanga when Nyanga is the highest murder capital in the country? None of that makes sense. So now you go consult with lawyers in civil society. And so that's actually an interesting thing, because you'll see a lot of NGOs are adopting or trying to get a legal sector within the NGO. And this is so messed up. This is the thing that really infuriates me, because you take someone to court and you say, you have to do this thing. According to the Constitution, you have to do this thing. But so much gets lost in translation, right? When you go to court, you can only focus on a policy issue, right? If you want to focus on a implementation issue, that's going to take you 500 more years, right? Because then you have to show how it's not being implemented. So you literally have to do all that groundwork, right? You have to get all of that information. But the court process is a very unparticipatory process. The only people that are involved in the court process is the head of your NGO and your legal team, right? So communities have literally no space and voice in the court process. And then also the court process focuses on one or few things. It doesn't talk about the system or, systemic issues or the culture of something. So when SJC took Becky Cele or the South African Police Service to court about police resource allocations. We had to choose one thing. Out of 20 recommendations, we had to choose one. One out of 20. And we said this is one of the most important ones. And I obviously stand by our decision. But it just points out that the court process, everything gets lost. So if you're looking at how to completely restructure how people in informal settlements are serviced by the police, you can't only focus on one recommendation. Like, it doesn't make sense. And that's what we've come to have to resort to. This is what we have to do to jump through the hoops of a lack of political will. You try and tap into all the avenues that will get the person on the receiving end with all of the power to see not only the logic, but also the lives that are affected by inefficiency.
So I think let's bring us back to Parliament. We have now sketched a very gloomy picture.
Yeah.
But the promise or the possibility of Parliament working well will eliminate a lot of the difficulties that you've described. So even where you then don't have a department working well, if Parliament steps in,
yes,
it can actually help to fix that.
Yeah. So, so obviously we've all painted very gloomy pictures, but this is by far better than anything we've ever had. This government tries to be transparent. This government tries to do the things on paper really well, right? So you have annual reports for every single portfolio committee or department within government. And so they've given you everything to hold them accountable. They've given you all of the stats, everything, right? So the transparency, I'm obviously someone who has only lived in South Africa, but the transparency that we have makes the job of civil society easier, because it's like, well, according to your own standards, you're messing up, right? According to your own reports, you're not doing the things. Where things get lost is where government holds itself accountable. The Republic of South Africa's parliament is better than anything we've ever had. The things need to happen, right? And you obviously get that historically these things never happened, right? Policing in informal settlements was never a priority for the apartheid government, other than to oppress people, right? Or to police people in the most violent way and to suppress activism and anti-apartheid resistance. So we take into consideration those things have never happened, right? On a local government level, there's never been public lighting in Legislature, right? So we acknowledge all of those things. But you do need to move. You can't just be like, we're better and that's it, and then we don't move. You need to move, because people are living their lives every single day. And if you don't move, those people literally die. So the fact that we get to go into parliament, and the bar is on the floor, but the fact that you get to go into parliament, the fact that you get to sit there no matter how hostile or unwelcoming the atmosphere is, the fact that you get to read annual reports, the fact that you can say, what are you doing for the budgeting process? The fact that we have budgets, right? That we can see budgets for our government, right? We can hold the city of Cape Town to the province, to the national government. We can be like, what are you doing in terms of your budget? So the fact that we have those tools is awesome, but movement needs to happen.
Do you have like one or two key kind of advice for someone wanting to work in parliament that's never been to parliament? Like, what would be your key takeaway for a community member and activist thinking, how can I make parliament better? What should I be doing?
Do it. Like, definitely do it, right? So, especially people who don't live in the city of Cape Town, right? People who live, in Portugal or in Swartland or in Teerwaterskloof or anywhere outside of the main CBD, right? You have a very particular experience. You have an understanding of how your community, however big and small, works. And honestly, the politicians that we have today don't have that level of understanding and choose not to. So do it. Do it because your lived experiences and your opinions are unique and they're different, and you experience South Africa in a very, very different way. But do it because you're owed this, right? Like, things happened for you to be able to walk into parliament and be like, today I want to go there. So you should do it because you have so much to offer in this space as well. So you'll learn how the systems and the processes work, but they'll learn how the system and the processes impact and affect your daily life. And that's profound.
Khadija, I want to say thank you on behalf of myself and Verb, for joining us this morning. Your insights have been invaluable to our process, and we wish you well on your journey. Inshallah, we hope that I hope that you achieve all of your dreams and that you never lose your activism heart and your political will. So yeah, take care. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you for having me.
The title of this project is Putting the People in People's Parliament, known as PPiPP. PPiPP trains and supports activists, community members, and people from civil society organizations to go to legislatures and tell them what we want from government, and also to hold the people elected to serve us to account to do their jobs in the way that the Constitution says. PPiPP is made up of different organizations. This project would not be possible without the generous support of the European Union, the Heinrich Böll Foundation, and the Open Society Foundation of South Africa. Even though the views that we have expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect the views of our donors, like us, these funders are committed to making sure that South Africa's democracy is open and serves the public. We all should expect that our elected reps do better. PPiPP knows firsthand how difficult it is to get information on how to access the legislatures and to meaningfully participate in decisions made. The official route is to phone, write a letter, email, or visit constituency offices, your legislatures or parliament. You can also ask for meetings with elected representatives. Parliament and the legislatures all have websites with contact numbers that you can find if you Google them. For people with access to the internet, the People's Assembly is a good place to find out who your elected representative is. If anyone is struggling to get information about Parliament or the legislatures, they can call us on 021 959 2951.
Avoid using language that is unparliamentary and out of order. Honorable members, keep quiet.
Stop thinking through your stomachs.
Honorable members,
Use your brains to think.
expired.